Can you prove through perception that you were born from the womb of a woman? Could you prove it? There is no way for you to prove that you were born from a womb of a woman.
لقد كان لكم في رسول الله أسوة حسنة لمن كان يرجو الله واليوم الآخر وذكر الله كثيرا.
بسم الله الحمد لله الصلاة والسلام على رسول الله. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. If you're watching this video, you're watching this video via some type of electronic device. Whether it's a smartphone, a laptop, a tablet, whatever it is, you're watching it through some type of electronic device. And nowadays, pretty much everyone has at least one electronic device that they use for communication. Whether it's for phone calls, to send an SMS, to use WhatsApp, to send an email, or maybe to watch a video like this. Now, despite this fact, it's very rare that you find people that reflect, that think about and understand how these electronic devices function internally. So when we use our laptop, we don't sit down and think about the fact that we're inputting data, we're inputting information through input devices, through our mouse or the trackpad or the keyboard or a touch screen. And that information is taken through these input devices and then sent in the form of bits, ones and zeros, to something called the central processing unit, otherwise known as a CPU, which takes that information in the form of logic, does calculations, interprets it, and then sends that information back out in the form of bits onto a screen for us to see. We don't think about that process. We just buy the laptop, bring it home, install some software, use it, and then complain when it breaks. And it is even more rare for people to actually sit down and consider the days and weeks and hours and years maybe that it is taking to design and to manufacture that laptop. And the only time that we consider this, and we consider the one that manufactured it, is when something goes wrong with the laptop, because we want it to be fixed. Now think about this same example with regards to the human being, the human body, because we too also have input devices, if you want to call it that. The human perception, the five senses, our eyes, our hearing, taste, touch, smell, the five senses. These are our input devices with which we collect information, data, which is then sent through our nervous system to a central processing unit called the brain, which then processes that information and then make conclusions with which we act on. How often is it that you sit down and think about that process? And it is even more rare for people to actually sit down and think and reflect on the fact that this must have some kind of designer, some type of creator that has created all of this and brought it into existence. And in fact, there are some people that use that very same central processing unit, that brain, to come to the conclusion through logic or half logic to conclude that there is no creator. Now the atheist comes to this conclusion because the atheist will say, well, if I cannot perceive with my five senses a creator, then I conclude that there is no creator. If I can't see, if I can't hear, if I can't touch a creator, then this must mean that there is no creator. Now if we use this logic for everything, then we're going to have a problem. Because if I were to ask you, can you prove through perception that you were born from the womb of a woman? Could you prove it? There is no way for you to prove that you were born from a womb of a woman unless you have a video camera that filmed you from the moment that you was born up until the age of reasoning and understanding uninterrupted. There's no way that you can prove it. A birth certificate could be forged. The person who told you that you came from the womb of a woman could be lying. If someone said you just sprouted out from the ground like a mushroom, how could you disprove that? There is no way that you can prove that you were born from the womb of a woman except through logic, except through reasoning. Because when you look at other human beings that have sight, that have hearing, that have arms and legs, that cry and laugh and get hungry and get thirsty just like you come to the conclusion that you too must be a human being just like them. And when you see other children, other babies being born and then growing up into adults, you make the intelligent conclusion that you too must have been a baby and must have come from the womb of a woman. This is the rational conclusion that you make. Because we know that everything that the human being can perceive with the five senses has a beginning. Whether it's a human being who started from a sperm drop, or it's a tree that started from a seed. And it is for this reason that scientists for hundreds of years, thousands of years, have pondered about the creation of the universe and how it all began. And it's for this reason that they have studied it through telescopes and observed the cosmos, and they have seen that the universe is constantly expanding and stars are moving away from one another. And if they were to rewind this, it would all come back to a central point, as if there was a combustion, an explosion. And this is where the theory of the Big Bang comes from. But then the question is asked, how did this Big Bang come about? And since when does order come from disorder? So for example, if the room that you're sitting in right now, or the car that you're sitting in right now, or wherever you are, if there was an explosion, would you know where your mobile phone would land, or where the TV would land, or where the desk would land? You wouldn't know, because explosion is chaos. You never know how it's going to turn out. So how could a Big Bang, an explosion that nobody knows how it came about, bring about this universe with its perfect orchestration, where the earth is swimming around in an orbit where if it was just to move slightly off its axis, we would be in ice age, or we would burn to death? How can this come about? By just chance, just randomness. If you consider the home that you live in, or the laptop that we spoke about earlier, if I told you that it just came about from dust particles forming together, sticking together and becoming a fully functional laptop, or your house with its plumbing and its electrics and all the brickwork, it just formed together by itself. It just came about just by chance, by no design, no architecture, no plumbers, no electricians. It just formed by itself. Would you accept that? Of course not. Your intelligence will not accept that. So why is it that there are people that accept that the universe, the heavens and the earth came about just by chance, through nothing? And recently I read an article where some scientists had come together and done some experiments, and through this experiment they had concluded that they had brought something from nothing. This is the conclusion that they came to, that they had done some type of experiment, and through this experiment they concluded that they were able to create something from nothing. And what they were insinuating is that it is possible for something to come from nothing, and the possibility that the universe could have come about without a creator. And what's really funny about this is that they haven't considered the fact that somebody had to carry out this experiment and cause this something from nothing. And in fact, their experiment disproves their very idea that something can come from nothing, because it is those scientists that had to carry out that experiment and had to cause something to come from nothing. And when you speak to an atheist who will tell you that we evolved from a single cell, let's for argument's sake say that we accept that. Let's say for argument's sake we accept that human beings evolved from a single cell. That does not disprove that there still had to have been a creator that has brought everything into creation. So let's break down the human being into the smallest thing, a living cell. Now, if you studied biology, you will know that the living cell is made up of cytoplasm, nucleus, mitochondria, and various other components. Now, in order for a living cell to be living, it needs to have all of these components together all in one time. So if you were to take away the nucleus or take away the mitochondria, that living cell would no longer be living. It would not be a functional cell and would not be able to evolve into anything. For example, if you took a mousetrap, which consists of a board, a hammer, and a spring. If you were to take away the spring, that board and that hammer would no longer be a mousetrap. It would no longer be functional. It's useless. If you took a car and you took out the engine, that car would no longer be functional. It won't drive anywhere. It will be stationary. It can't move. So if you took the living cell and you remove the nucleus or the mitochondria, that cell is non-functional. So how could a non-functional cell evolve into something else that is living? The cell has to be living in the first place to be able to evolve into something else that is living. So then we come back to the question, how did the living cell come to be living? That cell had to have been designed and created into a living cell for it to have evolved into something else that was living. And so if you haven't thought about this before, if you haven't reflected on this before, and you haven't thought about how has all of this universe and the human body and the human being come into existence, think about it today. Jazakumullahu khair. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.